Sigmaya and Lordran, we will now be looking at some extra detail here within the Undead Church that we didn't cover in the previous visit. Here, the altar that we looked at that represented Priscilla, and the reliefs that represent Ulysses. But notice this in front. Notice these symbols of fertility around here. And notice here the birds. The birds are made of gold, and a dull gold, maybe brass. This is different to the shiny, wet appearance of the relief that represents Ulysses and the statue that represents Priscilla. Notice how the statue is shiny. This is used by the designers of Dark Souls to convey passage through time. Now if we come over here to these statues here that we saw last time, we notice that by the light, this relief looks golden, and the statue is not polished. It's dull, and it's not a nice marble. It's more like a concrete type creation. So what is happening here is the representation, is the idea that these three items here that represent Priscilla and Ulysses were added later. That this altar existed before Priscilla's statue, and perhaps another statue stood there before it. So now let's quickly talk about the style of these statues. The styles here, the styles at the front of the Undead Church with Priscilla, and the style of the statue that we found below in Filing Shrine. If we take these in order, if we remember the statue at Filing Shrine, we see the Witch of Izalith sitting with the child in her lap. This is an old style of statue. The details are rough, and the construction of the statue is done in a way that's very basic. So this happens in statues in real life as well. The statues in Egypt or Mesopotamia are very large, bulky statues because the engineering required to make a large statue of someone sitting or a sphinx lying down, like the Sphinx in Egypt, is much easier than making a statue that is standing like this. And the statue that is standing like this, when they were designed in the real world, they were designed like this because they were designed like columns. The idea was that they were columns that were carved out with extra detail, because the engineering to make something standing like that was a lot easier, though more complicated than making a sitting statue, like the one we see in Filing Shrine. And then we have another type of statue here, which is a very dynamic statue, which is very similar to the statues we see in the real world around in the Renaissance, where the artists are able to hide the engineering feats required to make something look dynamic in the form of the sculpture itself. Now, I'm not saying that this sculpture or any of these sculptures can actually be made in real life. I have no idea. I'm not a sculptor. Luckily, this is a video game, but that is what is being captured by the artists of Dark Souls. They would know about that kind of progression of statue construction, and they're using that visual design here to show us the passage through time. So here we have, that statue, those reliefs were added later. That altar was here before Priscilla was worshipped here during the period of Ulyssil. And now returning to inspect some of the details of these female statues. And if we look at the bottom of the sculptures, we see that they are marked by the goat images we saw over here in the relief. So what does that mean? Well, as discussed a few episodes ago, the Witch of Izalith was a giant. We have the image of the goats, which represent the giants, below these women with fire atop their staves, just as we saw in the opening cutscene with the Daughters of Chaos. These statues here represent the 8 Daughters of Chaos. And they were worshipped in the Undead Church at a point as well. At a different point in time to Priscilla, the Dark Moon Goddess. So, now having discussed all of that, let's raise this gate that was closed on us in a previous episode, collect the basement key, and move through back to the Undeadburg. So as we head back to the Undeadburg, I would like to discuss what the Undeadburg is. Now, if you have watched the 3rd episode, which involves if you've watched the episode with the prophecy of the Undeadburg, you already know the nature of the Undeadburg. But now we need to start bringing the nature of the Undeadburg into the discussion of the lore of Dark Souls. So I will be revealing that nature now, but without spoilers. So I'll just be bringing in the elements that are relevant as we go. If you would like to get ahead and see me talk about some of the elements there in a prophetic type way, that is in the Undeadburg prophecy. So what is the Undeadburg? It is exactly that, the homes of the undead of Lordran. It is a symbolic map of all the areas you visit during your hero's journey through Lordran. And by deciphering some of the design elements that have been placed in the Undeadburg, you can get extra detail about the story of Dark Souls. So here, in this area here, for those who have played the game, this is a heavily defended tower. And during that episode, we picked up from this location the wooden shield. Notice that the wooden shield has the painting of a white dragon on it. This is Seefs Tower. That is in Londo, called the Duke's Archives. And this area back here is his prison. Now, the one that is relevant to this episode is this place, guarded on top by two characters that represent the sealers of New Londo. Now, for those who have not played the game, when Gwyn went to link the first flame, when at the end of the Age of Dark, the first Age of Dark, just had some technical issues. I got booted off the network. So, what was I discussing? Yes, New Londo. New Londo. During the first Age of Dark, Gwyn created a city called New Londo. And it was to be a replacement for Londo, the City of Gods. What had happened in the First Age of Fire and the First Age of Dark was that Gwyn spent his time in Londo, and people could come to Londo. That city up there was Londo. And humans were allowed to come to Londo once they proved their worth to the gods. So all of the great artists and warriors and priests of Lordran were allowed to come and live with Gwyn and the other gods in Londo. But what happened was that the men that were left below began to stray from Gwyn's way, as there was no hope for them to ever reach Londo. And so they grew distant from Gwyn and discovered other things that Gwyn didn't want them to discover. And that is what led to the First Age of Dark and the rebellion that occurred there. So, Gwyn, before he went to link the first flame, he created New Londo, which was a city just beyond Firelink Shrine that we will see later, as a place for the gods to guide the humans that were not in Londo. And the way, for those who have played the game, to realize that this is a symbolic representation of New Londo is I'm being attacked through the walls of this place. Luckily, it's easier to get to this enemy than it is to get to the other ones in Londo, and there's less of them. So when Gwyn created New Londo, he found 4 great leaders to rule New Londo after he went to lead the flame, and he gave them each a piece of his Lord's soul, so that they could guide the humans below. Now, in the episode of the prophecy of the Undeadburg, we got this key, the residence key. Key to a residence in the Undeadburg. Simple, sturdy design of the locks in the burg keep out unwanted visitors, and this is a standard key in these parts and will open several residences. And we purchased that key from the Undead Merchant. So what the residency key is a symbol of Gwyn's legacy, and that is why we find it in New Londo. As Gwyn, that is where Gwyn ends his legacy. He creates New Londo as a place where the people below will continue to worship him after he has lit the first flame and follow his way, the way of light. And that residence key opens this locked door. And the reason that it is locked is because, just as we saw at Sen's fortress, the way to Londo is locked. Notice in here, there are 4 chairs, 2 of which have been knocked over. And out the back here, we find the strongest symbol of Gwyn, which is the gold pine resin, is in this chest for safekeeping. Notice that in the city of Londo, the candelabras do not have candles. So, that is the Undeadburg, and what the Undeadburg is, the collection of the undead, the homes of the undead. And a similar game, symbolic game, is at play in the basement, but the basement is different. Basement key opens the narrow passage leading below at the far face of the Great Bridge in the Undeadburg. The lower Undeadburg is a treacherous place. Do not turn your back on the wily thieves or the wild dogs who serve the Capra demon. The basement is a place full of the symbols of things the people of Lordran wish to put away and forget about. And it is guarded by these dogs. Notice the design of these dogs. Black, red, and eaten away. And here we have a nice simple symbol. I won't do all of the symbols, but this is a nice simple one just to show what's happening down here. This is Filing Shrine. Here we have the pond that we rest at with the fire. The fire that marks the firekeeper down below. With the bonfire that marks the firekeeper down below. And here we have the actual Filing Shrine, a well. There is water in the well at the moment, but at some point that water does drain. And so here we have the door that is open by the residence key. And think about that. Think about this is the legacy of Gwyn as we listen to the dialogue as we approach.
Somebody, please let me out of here. Somebody, anybody, help me. Unlock the door. Damn, I'm finished. How did this ever happen?
And here we have Griggs of Finheim. And he is one of the nicest characters in Dark Souls, and it's always a pleasure to see Griggs of Vinheim. But before we talk to Griggs, we'll talk about the poor dead sorcerer that is in this room with Griggs. So, the sorcerer's outfit. Hat worn by proper sorcerers who studied at the Wilhelm Dragon School. The majority take pride in having studied at the academy and look down on breaking the formal dress code established for sorcerers. So they were being introduced to the idea of the sorcery school, the Wilhelm Dragon School, which is a school of sorcery. And the thing to note there, that in the school, for the Dragon School, the school for sorcery, everybody must dress the same, and those who do not dress the same are looked down upon. And that is because these are symbols of the everlasting dragons. Every everlasting dragon looked the same, except for Seef the Scaleless, and he was looked down upon for not looking the same as the others, for he was different. And when you're an everlasting dragon and your very being is inertia, you do not see difference and change as a positive thing. You want everybody to be the same. And you may notice immediately that Griggs of Vinheim is dressed differently to myself, and that is because Griggs of Vinheim represents more the Drake branch of the dragon family. The dragons that still have a mission and a purpose in the world. And so we have the symbols of the everlasting dragons. So let's have a quick chat to Griggs.
Brilliant. You opened the door for me. Thank you. I'm saved. I thought I might never escape. I am Griggs of Vinheim, a sorcerer of the school. I am much obliged for your assistance. Thanks to you, I may now resume my travels. Oh, hello. I'm fine. I will rest a while, then return to Firelink Shrine. I have my sorcery, and I will be more cautious next time. Besides, I have an important task at hand.
So what we are getting from this quick dialogue with Griggs is that if he is a symbol of the everlasting dragons, as I claim, he is glad to be released. Notice he is alive while the others are dead and rotting or in barrels. The other thing to discuss there is that he has learned to be more cautious next time. So the everlasting dragons, if they ever got a second chance, have learned to be more cautious this time, because just as we approached in the door, Griggs was astounded he'd gotten himself trapped, and that is the same astoundment that the everlasting dragons had. And sometimes the information can flow the other way into the NPC quest. How did Griggs end up in this room? It is because he was betrayed by his own. Now notice, if I had taken everything that I just said about the dragons and replaced it with Gwyn, the scene would have played out very similarly, but there are a few key differences that separate the two stories, the most important being Gwyn did not get a second chance, and this overlap is intentional and goes to the core of the Dark Souls theme cycles, and that is that things that happened before have echoes in what happens after. Gwyn, who strove for order after his rebellion, was betrayed by his own, defeated and locked away, just like the everlasting dragons, and the fact that he was naive, that his age of fire would not last forever. He was naive to the nature of the flame itself. Just like Solera of Astora, as he looked up at the sun and admired it when we met him over by the watchtower. And remember, Solera of Astora is a symbol of Gwyn's children. So we see the cycle continuing on past Gwyn.